What's going on, everybody? You are in Green's house. I am Jericho Green, and you know what we do here. We talk to people who have a very interesting story to tell, an interesting occupation, or both. Today is no different. Today I'm joined by Clint Curry. He is the district attorney for the county that I live in, Yuba County, California, near Sacramento. And we're going to talk to him about his path to being a district attorney, his time serving in the United States Army, and fentanyl, probably one of the main things that he's dealing with now. We're going to talk about the homelessness crisis. But I want to end this on a positive note. I want people to have hope when we're done talking about this, because myself included, I've thought that California's lost. There's nothing we can do, but I think there is. And I want to know what we can do as citizens, and not only citizens of California, but citizens of America, because as we well know, what happens here will soon be happening there. So without further ado, let's bring in the man of the hour, Yuba County District Attorney, Clint Curry. Clint, thank you very much for being here.
You bet. Morning, Jericho.
I'm so glad you took the time. I know you're a busy man. As my dad would say, you're probably busier than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest.
Some days it's like that, for sure.
So let's make good use of your time. First of all, I want to start with how I made your acquaintance. You and I were both at a fentanyl meeting, I guess, at my daughter's junior high school at Riverside Junior High. And the fact that they had a meeting like that kind of blew me away, especially for kids so young. You usually don't think of kids dealing with such heavyweight issues like this, like drugs or something, until high school. I wish they never had to deal with that as kids, but usually you would think high school or something like that. So before we get into why we met, I want you to tell the people kind of how you grew up, where you grew up, what was your family setting like, and then I want to get into your service in the military. But first of all, let the people know, where did Clint Curry start?
Well, Jericho, I didn't make it very far from home. I grew up here in the Yuba Sutter area. Went to Yuba City High School, just across the river. Kind of grew up between the two counties, Yuba and Sutter County. So my parents were married. My mom was a criminal court clerk here in Yuba County. My dad was a defense attorney, and later in his career, he was a judge. So, dinner time conversation was, it was kind of natural that I ended up where I ended up. But yeah, grew up here in Northern California.
So you were kind of steeped in law, in the practice of law from birth.
Yeah, I remember the hook got set. I think I was in 8th grade, and my dad was doing a court martial actually out at Beale Air Force Base. He was civilian defense attorney for a guy who was accused of moving some dope. And so I don't know if it's spring break or what, but I went out and I watched the whole trial. I read all the police reports, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And kind of, I mean, not a completely straight line from there, but definitely the hook got set for doing actual trial work, which is its own, specialty as far as attorneys go, right? There's a lot of lawyers who never see the inside of a courtroom.
Wow. And that's kind of cool. You mentioned that you didn't make it far from home, but I think that could be a benefit, is the area, the people, and you care about the area and the people, because this is your home. This is, where you were born and raised. And so you have a special place in your heart for Yuba County. So I think that's a benefit for everybody. And so you joined the U.S. Army. How did that go? And before we get into, that whole process in your career in the Army, do you remember getting to basic training? Did you have like any prior, were you ROTC or anything, or were you on the bus and just totally freaked out at what was going on?
No, I did ROTC in college. I got a scholarship to go to UC Davis. And so, it's kind of, ROTC is weird because you don't go to a basic training from the get. Like, you show up for these Army classes on your college campus. And so, I remember walking in first day, my bootlaces hanging out. I mean, I had no idea how to wear a uniform or how anything went. And so that's a big part of the ROTC program is, teaching these kids who are going to be officers, how to do all the courtesies, everything that gets baked into basic training. It just kind of gets stretched out
Mhm.
over college career.
Very cool. So, um, being in the sir, being in ROTC and going to UC Davis. So, people who may not know, UC Davis is a big ag school.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people doing agriculture for all these different companies, different kinds of crops and stuff. A lot of them go through UC Davis. That's a very good school for that. But they do have a good law program. Obviously, it produced you and got you here in part. So they do have a good law school there. But how was your time in the military, and how long were you in, and what rank did you reach?
So I did the 4 years of ROTC during my undergrad at Davis, and then from literally I graduated in the morning, walked moved the tassel and all that kind of business, and then went across campus and was sworn in as a second lieutenant that afternoon. That was 1999. My wife and I, we got married the very next Saturday, and I served 4 years active duty from there, and had a good time doing it.
Wow, that was a heck of a week for you.
It was a heck of a week. I graduated, got a job, I got a wife,
Man,
just like that.
you packed a
Um,
lot into those 7 days.
I did, and so after that, I spent some time at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri for the engineer officer basic course. Learned all about blowing things up and construction management. And then from there, my permanent station was Fort Richardson, which is right there in Alaska, just outside of Anchorage. So,
Man,
newly married, newly commissioned, and off we went to the great state of Alaska.
wow. Because and I'm sure culturally it was quite a shock to the system, but the weather as well. People may not know we are up, I guess, technically Northern California, but there's no snow to speak of here. You're not
No.
shoveling anything. You don't have to bundle up before you go out. So I'm sure getting to Alaska was like, whoa.
Yeah, it was like snow on the ground. The roads are iced over. We had to put little cleats on our shoes when we go running, and so you make this clickety clackety noise as you run. But it was a good time. Alaska was a great station, beautiful state. This was 99, right? So I was in 99 to 03, which until the very end was peacetime.
Mhm.
And it was, beautiful. Like I got to deploy to places like Valdez, Alaska, to help put up a radar tower. Got to deploy to Kathmandu, Nepal, to help build a health clinic. I mean, it was um, those were really good years.
Yeah. So not only did they teach you to blow it up, they taught you to build it up
Yeah, and
as
so that's
well.
kind of, on the Army side, when you become an engineer officer, they teach both the construction management. So, like Navy, you guys had the CBs. So,
Mhm.
Army's got engineer units that are very similar, bulldozers, electricians, carpenters. I mean, you name it. Um, but as an officer, you can, during your career, you'll kind of bounce back and forth between the construction side and the combat side. So I feel super blessed that I ended up in a construction unit for my time in active duty. Had a blast. Uh, Promoted to captain before I got out. It was a good experience.
So how did you go from being the kid of a lawyer and a judge and being, kind of groomed in that career to being an engineer in the Army? Did you want to do that, or did the Army kind of say this is what we want you to do?
I mean, it's a combination of those things. Engineer was on my list along with armor. It, they picked engineer, and that worked out.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. So you're married, you're an officer in the Army. So when did you guys start your family? Were you still serving at the time, or that was something?
No, we waited pretty much a decade. So
Oh
from
wow.
I got out in '03, and I actually thought that I was going to spend some time in school to become a chaplain, and I was going to go back on active duty. So when we left the Army, we moved to Chicago, and within about 3 months, I knew I wasn't going back in the Army, but I was enrolled in this seminary, to get like they call it a Master of Divinity. It's what pastors and chaplains is the master's
Mhm.
degree that they do. So within 3 to 6 months, I was like, okay, I'm not going back on active duty. And I asked my wife, I said, hey, this is kind of fun, this seminary stuff. Can I do this and then go to law school? And she looked at me and she said, I will kill you. So,
That was the
I,
end of that.
yeah, that was the end of that. I finished out the year at seminary, and then we actually moved back home, and I went to UC Davis again, this time for law school.
Okay. So you got out in '03. So obviously you were in '01. What was 9/11 like for you?
Oh man, that was weird. I was actually up at Fort Wainwright, which is near Fairbanks, on 9/11. I was up there to do an inspection for this battalion we supervised, and old Army buddy from the that's out on the East Coast called me, woke me up, and was like, "You got to turn on the TV." And no one in Alaska could figure out what to do. Right? I mean, we rented a car because we couldn't get a flight, even a military flight back to Fort Richardson. Drove back, and for the next 3 months we worked 12 on 12 off to do nothing but secure our own base. I mean, it was bizarre. We were putting up cattle fencing around the barracks because that was going to keep the terrorists out.
Yeah. Well, terrorists, you put up a cattle fence in front of them. It's like, garlic to a vampire. They can't
Right, they
handle
just
it.
can't do it. Yeah, so we we had a bunch of Joes out there standing along the cattle fence with empty rifles to guard the barracks for about 3 months. um, and then at some point, they realized, like, I guess we have to keep on doing missions and stuff, and so they eased the posture on post so that we could start doing training again. And
Mhm.
it was that actually, it was right after that I deployed to Valdez to help put up this radar tower that was going to have a capability to even pick up like a rowboat coming
Oh,
into the
wow.
Valdez oil terminal. So it was kind of a 9/11 force protection environmental, because it could also pick up like those little icebergs that could put a
Mhm.
hole in an oil tanker. So it was, yeah, 9/11. That was crazy, man.
That was a strange time for everybody, that 3 months you mentioned. Everybody kind of dealt with something like that, the unknown. Will there be more? Are they going to attack something else? What would it be? Is it going to be planes again? Is it going to be something else? And as you mentioned, your friend telling you to turn on the TV. Normally, that's something you hear on TV or a movie, but that was a real moment that we all lived through, where those images, I mean, still, you see them today. Of course, you see them a lot more on 9/11, people posting things and doing, little documentaries or tributes, and still can't get over it. And then when you see those images, it still takes you back to that moment where you saw him for the first time. And of course, the first one was an accident. We all thought it was an accident. Man, what a dumb pilot. How do you?
Yeah.
And then to see the second one happen live on TV is something I hope we never experience again. But there's nothing to compare it to. There's nothing like 9/11, and I hope that's the only one we ever have.
Yeah, me too. Terrible.
Wow. So how did your path start to becoming a district attorney? What did you have to do to get that going?
Well, I knew I was interested in criminal law, having grown up in the household I did. I also, during high school, had volunteered as a sheriff's cadet over there in Sutter County. So I kind of, in fact, when I went to law school, I'd almost gone to the police academy instead. And so I kind of knew I wanted to work on criminal law. So I asked to intern in the Sutter DA's office, because my wife and we moved back up to Yuba City at the time because our families were all up here. There was no
Mm.
sense in living down in Davis just because I had classes. So I did a full time semester in the Sutter County DA's office as a student, and you get it again. You get in the courtroom, and it's either in your blood or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's a lot of attorneys that never see a courtroom, but if that's what you like, then um, just again, the hook is set. So I really kind of focused on the criminal law stuff in law school.
And how many years of law school did you have to go through?
It's 3 years, 3 painful years, because only the first year is worth going to. So after that, I think they're just making money off of you.
Mm-hmm. Were you doing like a lot of internships and stuff like that, working on cases?
Yeah, that's the most important stuff. It really, I mean, law school, you learn some about legal research and writing, and so like I said, the first year is definitely good, but after that, like you're just looking for experiences that are practical. And so one of those was the DA's office. Another one, I spent a summer in The Hague. I clerked for a federal judge, or interned for him. I'm sorry, one summer. So just trying to get as much practical experience as you can.
Mm-hmm. Now I did a little bit of research on you, but not too much because I want to learn the bulk of it from you.
Okay.
But your time working overseas prosecuting war crimes, was that in the military or was that after?
No, so that was after. That was part of my law school again, like looking for these practical experiences. So I applied to intern with the international. This is a mouthful. International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and
How the heck did that? How did you get in touch with them?
well, so as it turns out, there's a lot of Americans that were serving over there as attorneys. And so a lot of the lead prosecutors that were, prosecuting, like Slobodan Milosevic is probably a name you actually remember. And so I happened to meet a guy at a wedding, um, who was back home for his niece's wedding, who said, "Hey, here's my card. Um, we're always looking for law students to come and intern in The Hague." So, it's a small world in some respects.
Yeah, it's truly who you know, not what you
Yeah.
know sometimes.
Well, or even just knowing that it's there, right? I mean, there's so many opportunities in this world. Like, I don't know that I'd probably heard of it, right? You're watching the news in the mid 90s, and, they're talking about UN Security Council, gosh, they're going to punish you guys if you keep this war up. We're going to drag you in and charge you with war crimes. I'd probably heard about it, but I wouldn't have thought about it, fast forward a decade, that there was actually a tribunal created and that there were attorneys working in the Netherlands to prosecute these people. But having found out, I was like, that sounds cool. Let's do that.
How long were you over there?
Just a summer. So my
Okay.
wife was a teacher, so it was perfect. We were able to go over and spend the summer. And I mean, it was a really cool experience. My supervisor was a South African guy. Our trial team had, a prosecutor from Moscow, one from Argentina, one who was from the Netherlands. I mean, a couple Americans, and so my army experience kind of overlapped because we're prosecuting war crimes. And so, as I'm reading through some of these reports about shelling of Mostar, and it just, my background kind of suited.
Mhm.
It was a great summer. I learned a lot.
Yeah, that like you mentioned, reading the reports and everything and looking at the images, that's something that a normie who doesn't do that for a living, we only see in a lot of ways, we only see the finished product. We only see you standing in the courtroom, but you guys have to consume a lot of information and you have to be very familiar with the case. So you guys have to see pictures and videos and stuff that's just horrific. I spoke to an assistant district attorney near here, and his job focuses on cyber sex crimes against children. And he's talking about his investigators that work with them and stuff, and the things they have to see, in order to bring justice, um, get justice for the family and bring those people to justice. So there's a whole other side that we don't know about, and I'm so glad that there are people like you who are willing to sift through all of those things to make sure that people pay for what they do and to try and make our life safer, to try to get the bad guys off of the street and put them away for as long as the law allows. So I want people to know that with a lot of jobs, often we don't see both sides of it. And there's another side where I wouldn't want to do some of that. I wouldn't want to see some of those things. And, thank God for people like yourself, law enforcement, who kind of run toward the danger, so to speak. Um, so how did you become district attorney? The election and everything. How did that whole process play out?
So after school, we went back to Alaska, and I clerked for a couple years for a federal district court judge. And we thought we'd live forever in Alaska. Like, we'd escaped the small town, and then we had our son, and it was like, oh no, the grandparents are all back in Northern California. So,
Yep.
yep. So we moved back. That was 2009. So fast forward from there, I spent 10 years almost in the Sutter County DA's office, just prosecuting cases, everything from, well, lots of domestic violence, lots of sex cases, just the career of a lifelong prosecutor, basically. And the DA in Yuba County retired, and frankly, no one else wanted this job for some of the reasons that you mentioned. I mean, these are tough gigs as far as just the content that we're exposed to. So it takes, already sort of a special set of people that are willing. Um, as my wife puts it, she says, "You go to hell every day."
Mhm.
Uh, so there's truth in that. You got to be willing to take, public pay, which is, not at the high end of the spectrum when it comes to lawyers. And well, you got to be willing to live in Yuba County too. So, I'm proud to live in Yuba County. I love it. I love it here. But there's just not a lot of lawyers who wanted this job. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
2019, I started as the elected DA here in Yuba County. And so I still try cases. I did 2 this year that I actually took to jury trial myself. But most of what I do is administrative now.
Okay. So now you're a district attorney. You've made it. You're the district attorney of Yuba County. So when does fentanyl tap you on the shoulder and say, "I'm here"?
It was really just a couple years ago. You go back 4 years, I'd never heard, or I can't remember hearing the word fentanyl ever. Um, Here in Yuba County, a really bad methamphetamine problem, some heroin, some oxycodone on the street, people taking pills, but lots of methamphetamine, lots of marijuana, lots of alcohol. Those were kind of the biggies. And all of a sudden, we started seeing this new drug, this synthetic opioid called fentanyl. And it is since 2019, it's over 300% increase from the few cases that we started to see trickle in, to the point now where it's almost in every case. Like, even if we're dealing with someone's got a baggie of methamphetamine, and their other pocket they got a baggie of fentanyl, or they got some of these counterfeit pills. So it is just flooded our state to where the other drugs haven't gone away, but we've added fentanyl to almost everything.
And that's how we cross paths.
Yeah.
It's become such an issue that you're having meetings like this at schools, and I'm glad that there were parents there. I wish there were more.
Yeah. I
But
mean, if you picture in your head, Sophie Stadium, right, where the Rams and the Chargers play down in LA,
yeah,
it seats, I think, about 70,000 people. That's the number of Americans who died in 2022 from fentanyl. Just over 73,000 died of fentanyl poisoning in 2022. It is, it exploded onto the scene, and it is killing people like a one-legged man in a butt kicking contest.
yeah, yeah.
Um, And so you can only arrest so many people. We're like, we got to get this information in the hands of every parent so that they can talk to their kids. And we got to tell every kid in America, frankly, but of course, we're focused on our county so that they have the knowledge to protect themselves um, from this new threat. And we can talk more about that and just how insidious it is because, people are like, well, if they know it's so bad, why are they taking it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, what they're doing is they're taking this synthetic opioid and they're pressing it into pills down in Mexico to make them look like other kinds of drugs. So you'll have a pill that is the right color and the right markings to be an oxycodone. They call them M30s. They're little blue pills. It'll look just like an M30. Like even the folks that work in the lab can't tell them apart until they smash them, dissolve them, and test them. One's oxycodone, but the counterfeit ones are fentanyl. And the problem with the fentanyl is it only takes 2 milligrams, like the tip of a pencil is enough of pure fentanyl it's a lethal dose for someone who doesn't have any tolerance. So you got kids that think maybe they're taking an oxycodone or they're putting it into Xanax, they're putting it into Adderall. Basically any of the street pills. Like you get a pill on the street today in Northern California, I don't care what the markings on it are, it's probably just a fentanyl and cut. That's all that's in it. There's no, it's kind of crazy. And so that's the thing, talking to these kids, like you can't just go taking a Xanax from your friend who got that thing on the street because it's not Xanax.
And I remember mentioning this to you. That's the scariest thing about it as a parent is you're not with your kids all the time. And after a certain age, their friends have more influence on them than you do. And your kid could be a good kid. Your kid could be getting good grades and playing sports and all those good things. But it just takes that one time that they go to their friend and the worst thing that life can possibly give you happens.
Right.
Um,
Like they're sore, they want to play in the game, but they got an injury or something, and their friend's like, "Oh, here's a Percocet," and I've heard of that. That's not a big deal.
mhm.
But if it's from the street, it's not a Percocet. It's wild.
Now the the pushers, the dealers, like you said, they press them in Mexico. They get it from China,
Yep.
goes to Mexico. The cartels press it up, send them over here. Now, a traditional drug dealer, you would think they want a product that their customer can use and they're going to come back because that's where the money is in the repeat customers. But it almost has a tinge of evil to it when when this isn't just going to addicts, this is going to everybody. As you said, 73,000 people dead last year from fentanyl, 18 to 45. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about race. It doesn't care about your social or economic status. So am I wrong in thinking that? Like there's an element of evil to this. You're killing kids. You're killing people who don't dabble in the drug life. They're not about that. If you've been, a heroin addict or something for 15, 20 years, you have the tolerance to take one of those. But the the casualties of this war are just insane. I just don't understand it. And I don't know, I've always been intrigued and interested at a human's capacity for evil to do something like that. You're taking out 100,000 people that shouldn't be taken out.
To make money. Bottom line. Yeah,
Man.
it's
So
crazy.
it really is. And so one of the questions that I asked at the meeting, and I can't remember the lady's name who was directing the meeting, but she did a great job. the information, and she's the one who talks to the kids. You know, we had the meeting the day before in assembly when she was going to talk to the kids, and they have somebody come out who unfortunately lost somebody to fentanyl to tell their story. So that lady did a great job. I'm glad there are people who are going to these schools and talking to these kids about it. But I mentioned the trust level that the average citizen has. Like we mentioned, not hearing fentanyl 5 years ago because you have your head down, you're working, you're taking care of your family, whatever. You're doing your job. You never heard of that stuff before. So there's a kind of a trust level. So to have this stuff pouring into the country, what is our government doing about it? Why would they not, to the average citizen, then why not seal the border? This is where a lot of it's coming from. We know, so they got to know. So why wouldn't you seal the border until we can get this epidemic under control?
Well, I mean, that's a question way above my pay grade. As a personal matter, I completely agree with you. I mean, we basically a decade ago in the United States, or at least in California, we surrendered the war on drugs. We looked at some of the unintended consequences, and our politicians just said, this was failed. We're going to end the war on drugs. Well, now we're seeing the result. I mean, maybe they were right that we couldn't win the war on drugs, but at least, we were in the fight. Now just, bring the fentanyl. And that's not to say law enforcement's not trying. I mean, the DEA at the federal level is working its tail off on fentanyl. We are locally too. But I mean, it's a huge fight, right? I mean, we're going up against international cartels that are making millions and millions of dollars of money. And so unless we get the resolve to do things like you're talking about, like, shut the border, do what you got to do. And over 70,000 people died. I mean, think of everything we did, that our government did for COVID.
Yeah.
And they shut the world down.
Yeah.
And, so I definitely think that there are things that they could do to fight this much, much harder. So on one hand, personally, I've got my opinions about what our government should do, and then I've got my little pond that I play in, and we're doing everything that we can with the tools that they give us, right? So it's tough.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you are from Yuba County is a benefit, because not only do you care about the people, you are one of the people of Yuba County, but you've also seen the change. You've seen what it's done. You've seen what Yuba County used to be and how this fentanyl is affecting people. And when I asked you that question at the meeting, you mentioned Prop 47 and Prop 57. Can you explain those a little bit and what they did?
Well, to take a step even further back, do you mind a little history?
Please.
All right. So 1990s, these lawyers start doing these class action lawsuits against the California prison system, the Department of Corrections. And the first set of lawsuits to get traction was basically saying that CDCR was inflicting cruel and unusual punishment on prisoners by not delivering adequate health care. And so this lawsuit's in the federal courts, and then about 5-6 years later, that's still in process. Another lawsuit basically saying it's cruel and unusual punishment because they're not delivering adequate medical care. So health, the mental health care and the regular medical care. So federal judge panel, 3 judges, they actually put the California Department of Corrections into what they call receivership. Big word, but what it means is this 3-judge federal panel said, California, you are screwing up your prison system so badly that we're appointing someone to be in charge of the medical and the mental health care in your prison system. They're going to work directly for us. They're going to report to us, and you've got to do what they say. So this is into the early 2000s. And that receiver was a guy by the name of Mark Kelso. And so he was basically working on a plan for how to get things right in California's prison system. And the peak in California comes in about 2006, and we had at that time somewhere between 165 and 173,000 inmates in California state prisons. So Kelso's plan is essentially, we got to build more beds. We're way over capacity. We need to build out more healthcare so that we can deliver adequate physical and mental health care to the inmates that we have locked up. Well, that report comes out somewhere around 2007. And we all know what happened with the economy, 2007, 2008. It fell off a cliff. And so there was no political will in Sacramento to build out the infrastructure that it was going to take to care for everyone that was in the prison system. So this 3-judge panel turned around and said, all right, well, if you're not going to build your way out of it, you got to reduce your prison population. And they picked a number, and it was around 120,000. So we were at, 165, 173. And they said, you got to get down below 120,000 because that's the number where we think you can actually deliver adequate services. And California, so then Governor Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown was the Attorney General. They fought it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, they can tell you to do that. You got to empty the prisons until you're down to about 120,000. So 2011, that comes down, and now, I think Jerry Brown at this point is now governor again.
Yeah.
And they passed what's been called realignment, AB 109. It's sometimes referred to as the Assembly Bill. And essentially what this did is it said, traditionally a misdemeanor, you can serve up to a year in the county jail. And the definition of a felony was that you could serve more than a year and it would be in state prison. Well, they looked at all those people in prison and they said, unless you're there for a violent offense, you're going to have to serve your prison sentence now in the county jail. So the state took this problem that had been brewing for decades and they punted and told the counties, if you want to lock people up for theft and drugs, do it in your county jails. We're not going to take them in prison anymore. So that was 2012. That was realignment. Right behind that, 2014, you get Prop 47. Prop 47, went to the voters, was passed by the voters, but it was very deceptive. Mm-hmm. It was called the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. And you want to know what it did to make neighborhoods safe and schools safe? It took theft and it raised the dollar threshold for a felony from $400 was a felony. It raised it up to $950. It basically eliminated our ability to charge someone who, entered Walmart with the intent to steal. We used to be able to charge them with burglary, right? They bring in their snippers and their bag where you knew the only reason they were going in was to steal. Couldn't charge them with a felony unless they stole more than $950. It also made all the drug possession crimes misdemeanors. So it took all that stuff that got pushed down to the county jails, or a lot of it, and then said, and we're going to eliminate even a bunch of the penalty by making it only a misdemeanor to possess drugs or to steal less than $950. And then just a year or two later after that, they passed Prop 57. Again, it was another one that voters voted for, but they really didn't understand. I don't think they understood what they were voting on. Prop 57 allowed the Department of Corrections to let people out early for behaving themselves in prison. And that's always been true to a little bit of an extent. Mm-hmm. But it went from, people serving somewhere between half and 2/3 of their sentence if they behave themselves, to now people are serving maybe a third of the judge gives a sentence of 12 years, and they're maybe going to serve 4. So all those things kind of added up. You want to guess what our prison population is today?
No, but I feel like you're going to tell me.
It's about 95,000.
So they
So,
have room to put more people in there to get back to that 120.
well, I mean, yes, they got room up to that 120, except Sacramento's closing prisons. They said,
Did,
look, we've done a great job. We only have 95,000 people in prison now. Gosh, we can even close prisons.
have criminals stopped committing crimes?
Nope. Not since the dawn of man, right? I mean,
Clint, maybe you can help. You can answer this lifelong question. My adult life, that doesn't make sense.
I know.
But when you think of these people up here who make these decisions, you think they're smart. You think they, why would you do that? They didn't even solve the problem. They just passed it to the county. They said, here, we got this big sack of runny dog crap. Here you go.
Yeah, basically. And they've done it since then with the juvenile system. We had one prison for juveniles in California for the worst of the worst: murderers, child molesters, that were under the age of 18 when they committed their, heinous crimes. And they closed it and said, counties, you deal with them. And now they're doing the same thing with mental health too. I mean, just
And the
our state is trying to spend all our tax dollars on housing and social programs and eliminating their responsibility to take care of things like this.
wow, you dropped a bomb, Clint. And so all these assembly bills and these props and these prison closures and these shuffling of the inmates from state prison to the county jail, through all of that, how does it benefit the law-abiding citizen? How does any of that make our everyday life safer moving around throughout society?
Well, it doesn't, Jericho. It just doesn't. Um, People are shocked to see the explosion in the homeless population since roughly 2014, the year that Prop 47 was passed, the year that we basically couldn't make it a felony anymore to go in and shoplift at Walmart and to possess hard street drugs. Um, and that's even, you look at how we were solving the problem as a society of, the massive amounts of addiction, and even mental health. We were sending people to state prison 16 months at a time. And, maybe that's not the perfect answer, but they basically said, we're going to stop doing that without an alternative to fix it. And so suddenly, we got people camping and pooing on our streets, and, sleeping out in front of our businesses and leaving drug needles at parks. It's really terrible that they did this without a real alternative infrastructure to deal with this, because it's not like the problems went away. It's not people stopped stealing or people stopped using drugs. We just took away tools to deal with it. The reason I think that they did a lot of this is, it comes down to politics, but a lot of it has to do with, waving the flag about racial disparities in the criminal justice system, and saying, gosh, the whole system must be racist. We just need to dismantle it. So that's the driver, one of the biggest drivers behind all this stuff. The rest of it is just, I think, people feeling yucky about the fact that they're sending people to prison. when their behavior is driven by drug addiction and mental health problems.
I would say stick a microphone in the face of the victims and see what they think.
Yeah, well, and the victims that are disproportionately impacted by these policies, guess what? They're people of color because they're living in these neighborhoods, right? Where, the pullback in criminal justice is having the hardest effect. I mean, they could have just as easily said the criminal justice system is racist. Look at how people living in these impoverished places are being hurt more by crime. We need to increase penalties. They could have just as easily done that, right?
I feel like my son is 7 years old. I feel like if I told him this, he would say, "Daddy, that doesn't make any sense. Why a child?" So they're basically picking one group of people of color over another.
Yeah,
They're siding with the criminal because obviously the victims of these crimes, like you said, are people of color. They want these people to go away for years and years. They don't want to be terrorized. They don't want to be robbed. They don't want to come outside and see their vehicle missing or a window smashed or wake up and there's a drug addled psychopath standing at the foot of your bed. What about them? What about that group of people of color? And it seems like, and I don't believe in all this people of color nonsense anyway. It's just who's committing the crimes, you need to be punished, period. And
right.
who has these yucky feelings about putting people in prison? They didn't appear in court for nothing. They weren't picking flowers and the police Yuba City PD just threw them on the ground and brought them to jail. So what about the victim? What about us?
Well, I think honestly that is the message of hope that I would have for you is the when the us get pissed off enough that we start paying attention, to what these people are doing in Sacramento, and we start telling them like, absolutely not. People who commit crimes ought to go to prison. If a judge sentences them to 12 years, they ought to do 12 years. Not this like, well, we'll let them out in 4 because we want to keep our prison population low. Like, at some point, we're going to have to solve the infrastructure issue, which is we needed more beds, we needed better health care. Um, in fact, they called it the Little Hoover Report, or they did this big report back in 2007, 2008. And one of the things they recommended was, CDCR ought to turn over their healthcare operations to someone who actually knows what they're doing, like Kaiser, or one of these big HMOs. Like, the government isn't necessarily the best at efficiency.
Nope.
And, so that was a potential solution as well to the issue of not delivering adequate mental health care and medical health care inside our prisons. But instead, nope, let's just empty them. Let's just, decriminalize stuff and decarcerate to fix our problem. That was the answer. And, that's coming home to roost now, I think, both the homeless population explosion that we're seeing, with the uptick in violent crime, all of this stuff. I think it goes back to, we have to be able to deal with people who want to violate the law or just can't stop themselves from violating the law in a way that protects the rest of us.
Yeah, I think if you're a law abiding citizen and you don't do anything wrong, I don't think you should be punished for somebody else doing something wrong. And by releasing them into society, that's punishing us. And then you have a lot of places in California and a lot of blue states, if you will, that make it tough to like get a CCW. If you don't live in like a red pocket somewhere, I hate to get political, but if you don't live in a place like that, it's hard for you to to carry a gun to protect yourself, which again does not make sense. If you're going to empty the prisons, you're going to release the bad guys, at least make it easy for the good guys to protect themselves. I
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
just flabbergasted by that. But I like that word decarcerate. I never heard that word before, so I'll be using that. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, Google decarceration. You will find a whole litany of stuff. You know, the ACLU loves.
Oh, the ACLU. Um, so yeah, like you mentioned, this explosion of homelessness, and it seems that way. It seems that way to those of us who, again, are living life and doing our thing. All of a sudden, you're just seeing these things, but it's not all of a sudden. It's been going on for decades, and now we're starting to see the fruits, I guess, of their labor to
Totally.
to release these people. So you mentioned us being pissed off and doing something about it, and making this pendulum swing the other way. So if, let's say, there's a group of 100 people outside of your office demanding answers, what do you tell them? What do you tell them to do to change things? What
Well,
directives would you give them?
I have to point them back to the legislature. Right? We're a divided government. As Americans, we don't trust any one person to hold that power. So I'm part of the executive branch. I enforce the laws that the legislature puts on the books. And it's the legislature since 2012, starting with the realignment and continuing forward, that have lowered sentencing, that have created a backdoor in the prison system for them to be let out early. That's where it's going to have to change. It's got to change at the legislature or by proposition. So direct democracy we have here in California, right? So it just floors me, like the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. Really? You know who decides what the ballot title is? The
No.
Attorney General. The Attorney General
Wow.
decides what the ballot title is. So if a group submits something, the Attorney General gets to name it.
And you can't convince me that there isn't some nefarious activity going on, because damn good and well that's not what's going to happen. These aren't going to be safe neighborhoods and safe communities when you lower the punishment. You handcuff, no pun intended, you handcuff law enforcement,
Yeah.
and you release these people. That's the exact opposite of a safe
Right.
neighborhood and a safe community. So there, again, that word evil pops up, because why else would you do this? And
Well,
they don't deal with the consequences of these policies. They don't live
some
with
of
them.
yeah, some of them I do. I think that there's evil because they're smart and they know exactly what's going to happen. Some of them I think they're naive. Um, they just feel bad that someone's going to get locked up because of their drug addiction. And I mean, look, if they had said we're going to decriminalize drugs, but we'll force you to go to treatment civilly if you're caught, like, okay, build out that infrastructure. Like, as long as you're solving the problem so that people aren't camped on the sidewalk, pooing on the street, leaving needles in our parks, right? I mean, solve the problem at least. And they didn't want to do that. I mean, the ACLU doesn't want people forced into treatment. They don't want people forced into jail. They're just too bad for the rest of us that want to be able to, drive to Costco and pull in, or our wife take the kids to Costco and feel safe. They're just like, too bad. You must be a racist that you worry about your safety when you go to the store, right?
Well, call me what you will. If that's the hat that I have to wear, then that's what I am, because that's what I want. And these aren't crazy extravagant requests. These aren't like, wait, you want it what? No, I just want to be able to go to and from. And we just moved up here almost 2 years ago, so not completely familiar with the names of things. But if you go into this town called Marysville, if you keep going straight, you run into this lake. Is it Lake Ellis or something like that?
Ellis Lake. Yep.
Yeah, big old lake. So about a year and a half ago, we'd been here for about 6 months, and my wife and I, and we have friends here, so we've been coming up here for a while, before we moved here. Man, one day, and my wife and I were both working from home. We're like, you know what? After we take the kids to school, let's go into Marysville and walk around that lake. It's about a mile or something around it. Do a couple laps. You're talking and everything with your wife. Next thing you know, you got a couple miles in of walking. Cool. It's a body of water. You got the geese there, whatever. So we pull up, and there were a couple red flags, but we're like, hey, let's go over here and walk. And needless to say, we haven't been back. There were some folks camped out around there. There was one point where we just said, no, we turned around and just walked back and backtracked, and went back to the vehicle, and just things like that. Why can't we go to a lake that our tax dollars pay for? Now, if they want to give us a refund on our taxes, since you can't go there, we'll give you your money back. That's one thing, but that's not going to happen. So why can we not go to certain areas?
I'm 100% with you. I growing up here, right? That lake, it was beautiful. I remember going with my grandparents and feeding the ducks and the geese. I proposed to my wife out there, on that little island in Ellis Lake. Like it was not always that way. But California policies have, tied the hands so much that, what do we do at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Both on the criminal side and then even civilly, cities are afraid to take care of those homeless problems, the blight, to clean up the camps, because here, at least on the West Coast, the federal court has made it, they're tying their hands too, saying, well, you can't really force them to leave unless you have enough beds for all of them at one time. Is kind of the way that the Ninth Circuit's been moving, and I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court is actually going to take that up this year, because it's just crazy. Like here in Yuba Sutter, we have places for people to go. They don't have to be on the street. We've got 14 Forward. We've got, we have all sorts of services. If someone is homeless and doesn't want to be homeless, they can get off the street.
I'm glad you said that. Because that was my next question. It's a common misconception that we just don't have the services for them. There's nothing we can do. There's nowhere they can go. They have to be out on the streets. And we moved from a city called Salinas, a big ag city. If you look in the crisper in your refrigerator, chances are something in there came from the Salinas Valley. And they had a building there. The newly elected mayor, she erected a $6 million facility, basically an apartment complex where these people could live, they could get services. But the one rule, and I'm sure it's across the board in any facility, is no drugs, no alcohol. So then you have people who there is help for you, but they just don't want it. So then what do? You can get clean. You don't want to, but we can't have you out here on the streets living the way you do and making it unsafe. It's not uncommon to drive through a town, a city, Sacramento or whatever, and see a homeless person talking to themselves or yelling to nobody on the street. I had the pleasure of doing a ride along with Officer Braley in the Yuba County or Yuba City PD. And he told me, and I'm not going to get into the story here, I did a video on it on my other channel, a nightmarish situation at a Starbucks in Yuba City. Complete nightmare. The dude was doing things in the restroom there that you can't talk about in front of kids. Okay. It was bad. Yeah. And the guy was doing this 7 hours after he got released from jail. So obviously he does not care. Maybe he doesn't have the mental capacity to care, but obviously this dude is hell-bent on doing savage, disgusting things in public. Why are you not allowed to grab that guy and remove him from society, whether he wants to or not? Again, what about us?
Yeah, what about us? And that's the bottom line. Like, people get into all these debates about, whether criminal punishment has a deterrent effect on others or whether it'll deter someone in their behavior in the future. But one thing I can tell you, if someone is locked up, they're not victimizing our community while they're locked up. Like, they might be victimizing other inmates, but they're not here in my community victimizing people. And that's the what about us. Like, there are some people who just continue to make choices to victimize others, and they ought to be locked up. I mean, no one should feel bad about it, because those are people are making choices.
Well, I like how you said my community. And before we get out of here, are we going to have Judge Curry in the future?
No, probably not. Being a judge it's a really respectable thing. I really appreciate the jobs that they do, but basically, a judge is a lot like an umpire. They call balls and strikes. Um, as the DA, I get to play,
Mhm.
and I think I have more impact here than I would sitting on a bench. It pays more, but I really like the work that we do here, trying to keep our community safe, right? Trying to do the right thing all the time. This is, I think, the best job that you can do with a law degree. I mean, we don't represent any one person and their interests. We represent the community, and doing everything we can to do the right thing to protect the community. And so it is. I love coming to work, even on those hard days, because we do deal with really hard things.
Mhm.
Um, things that happen to children that we won't talk about.
Mhm.
It's great work, and so to be here, to be able to build a team that is working to keep Yuba County safe, I'm right where I want to be, even on the hard days.
Mhm. When you're needed the most. And I love your attitude. I like to hear you say things like my community. I love to come to work because that's going to benefit us. And it's great to know that we have somebody who's fighting for us, because now more than ever, people need to know
Yeah,
that this city, this county is not lost. This state is not lost. We have people like you who are fighting for us, and we need to fight better for ourselves. We need to make ourselves more or better educated about these bills and that they want to pass, these Senate bills, these assembly bills, these props. Of course, they're going to make them sound nice and rosy and
yep,
happy because they want them passed. But we have to do our due diligence. We have to read a little bit and do some homework. And it doesn't take much. You peel back a layer or two and you're going to see what's really inside of these things. So it's incumbent upon us to do our work as well. But I think with people like you and citizens who want change, I think we will see that change. And
yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we're still a democracy, right? We're in the driver's seat. It just doesn't feel that way in California,
yeah,
but it is. We're in the driver's seat.
so we need to drive, and we need to drive better. And those people who will be watching this interview who don't live in California, like I say all the time on my other channel, you may laugh at California and I can't believe you guys are doing that, but believe me, when you hear something pass like the ebony alert in California now, they're the first state to do that. They're the first state. They're not the last state. It's coming to a theater near you.
Hmm.
So be on the lookout. California, I know we get a little crazy sometimes, but we export that crazy sometimes too.
Yeah, often, often.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that all your listeners could do. Um, Thanksgiving's coming up, right? Talk to everyone that you see at Thanksgiving about fentanyl, and help them understand that it's in these counterfeit pills. Make sure there's not a kid that you have contact with that doesn't understand that if they take a pill or a powder off of the street, that they're playing Russian roulette with their lives. That's something we all can do, is to help spread that message. And hey, if one less kid doesn't take that pill and is alive next year, then that's a win, right?
Yeah, definitely. And knowledge is power. So definitely educate. like I mentioned, we had the meeting as parents with you and the lady who ran the meeting. And so the next day she was talking to the kids at an assembly. So later that day, that evening, we talked to my daughter about it, you know, what she thought of the assembly, what she got from it. And, you know, some other, we talked to her about what we talked about, you know, with the other parents and stuff. So I think she understands as much as her 11 going on 12-year-old mind can. So yeah, you got to do what you can. You have to talk, you got to educate, and you know, that's a great idea. You're all going to be around the table anyway.
Yep.
And you know, you're going to be talking about some crazy stuff that's probably going to piss off a third of the table. So
Yeah.
might as well get something out of it.
And there's something bipartisan, right? Like everyone can get fired up about fentanyl and protecting kids. Like that's
Yeah.
not a left or right. So you know you got your liberal uncle from the Bay up here to Yuba County. You know you can talk to him about fentanyl and how we need to let all the kids know.
Yeah, we have to find common ground. And another common misconception is that we don't have common ground. We do. We have a lot more in common than we don't, and we need to remember that. And there might be outside influences trying to tell us, no, 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 you guys are separated along these lines or these lines. No, we're all living life. We're all doing the same thing, and we all need to come together to change it. Because I think ultimately it's going to be in our hands to do so. Clint, I thank you, man. This has been a great talk. I won't even call it an interview. This has been a great talk. There's a lot of good information in there. And I thank you for coming in to tell your story, you know, the beginning of how you were raised in the Army and getting into being a district attorney. And thanks for fighting for us. You know, I really appreciate that. And I hope to have you on here again. And I hope if and when you do come back that things have changed. Maybe you won't have as many of those hard days as you talked about going into the office, and maybe we can beat this fentanyl back a little bit, you know? So I thank you for your time. Don't go anywhere, Clint. I'm gonna sign off. I'll be right back.
Thank you, Jericho.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate it. So there you have it, people. We talked about what the problem is, but more importantly, we talked about solutions. So please talk to the kids. And I know it sucks to be forced into these conversations with your kids that you never thought you'd have to talk about this early, or it's something you didn't have to deal with as when you were a kid. But this is where we are. We're parents, we're community members. We got to do it. We got to rip that band-aid off. We got to talk to the kids, and we will win. The pendulum will swing. The power's in our hands. All we have to do is use it. I thank you guys for tuning in for another great get together on Green's House. You know how I do it. I drop these interviews every Monday. Make sure you like, subscribe, share. Meet me in the comments. Tell me what you thought. You liked it? You didn't like it? Whatever. Let's communicate. Let's talk. Let's save this country. But until the next one, you guys, I'm out.